Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Yashodanandana Vrajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vrajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Punya Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Giridharadhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Giridharadhari Yashodanandana Vrajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vrajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Mansa Paribrajacharya Sakarajya Smada Pujatan Saraswati Goswami Bhagavad Jaya Nanda Gauri Vaishnava Ki Jaya Ramacharya Sri Haridas Thakur Ki Jaya Prem se kaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaur Bhakti Jaya Sri Radha Krishna Go Gopinath Sam Kanda Radha Kanda Giri Ki Jaya Vrindavan Dham Ki Jaya नवदीप धाम की जाए गंगा माई की जाए यमुना माई की जाए द्वारका धाम की जाए स्वामी भक्तवृंद की जाए ऑल ग्लोरीज टू द ऑल ग्लोरीज टू द थैंक यू वेरी मच
Hare Krishna, everybody. Hope all of you can see my screen and hear me. Welcome to an early morning class. Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Yeah, that's
Hare
early
Krishna,
morning.
everyone.
Maulik, why? Thank you for joining. I believe it's 11 p.m. in Melbourne.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. And I know it's pretty late for you. Thank you for joining. I am hoping this time worked out for everyone and everyone can have some increased participation. So thank you. So I guess we'll get started. We believe we completed through text 5 of chapter 4 titled Transcendental Knowledge. Is it right? The personality of God had said, my many births, both you and I have passed. I can remember all of them, but you cannot, O subduer
Yes,
of
Prabhuji.
enemy. Yeah, so we discussed that. We'll continue from text 6. By the way, I know I owe uploading last 2 classes. I did download them. I just have to upload just after this class. I'll try to get that done. So we'll begin with text 6. So far, what has been discussed is Krishna begins this chapter by saying, how ancient this knowledge is. And he'd spoken this millions of years ago, to which Arjuna is bewildered. And he's asked, well, how do we understand this? You're about same age as me. While the sun god is much more ancient. And so Krishna explains that, well, I had many births. You had many births. Everyone had many births. You don't remember any, but I remember them all. We don't even remember what we did yesterday. So here Krishna is now establishing his original position as a supreme personality of Godhead. And let that ambulance pass. Sorry about that. Let me go ahead and close the door.
We can't hear anything, Prabhu.
Sorry, I just stepped out to close the door. So Seattle's pretty hot, as you know. It will be roasting at 106 Fahrenheit over this weekend. Most homes in Seattle don't have air conditioning. I just opened the door and window. I live just across from a hospital. So then you have ambulances going off all the time. Anyway, I closed the window. Yeah, I was saying is Krishna tells that, so far in the previous chapter, Krishna has not explicitly described his position, that he is the supreme personality of Godhead. Now that revelations come when there is inquiry. Now Arjuna is inquiring. What you are saying is not does not make sense. Of course, he's asking on behalf of everyone, not just for. Of course, he knows that Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead, but in order to make that distinction very clear to everyone, all other who would be listening Bhagavad Gita in future, he explicitly asks the question, how do we understand this? Especially when Krishna says that, hey, this knowledge, though I spoke to sun god millions of years ago, in the due course of time, the disciplic succession was broken. And so this appears to be lost, and now I'm re-establishing it. And here it says it appears to be lost. That means this knowledge can never be lost. Sometimes it is manifest, sometimes it is not manifest. But that doesn't mean it's completely lost. Vedic knowledge, Vedic culture can never be destroyed. So that is the point. And so now that Krishna is saying that I'm re-establishing the chain, which was disciplic succession, the chain of disciplic succession, which was lost. So that gives a cue to Arjuna that, okay, this knowledge is not just for you. This is the beginning of a new succession. It's for everyone who would, study this great knowledge in future. And so on behalf of everyone, Krishna is making this inquiry. How do I understand that you instructed this knowledge to sun god who is ancient by his age and by his existence? To which Krishna replies that all of us had many births. You and me both have had many births. But you don't remember any, but I remember them all. So now the next question might be, okay, Krishna also takes birth. Then he would also be subjected to death. Is that right? I mean, one difference is, well, you remember all the births. I don't remember any. But there are people who also remember some births. But Krishna remembers all births of not just himself, but everyone, every living entity. We had millions of births, and Krishna remembers all the details of all living entities across all their births. So the next verse, Krishna further elaborates what is his position. So verse number 6. Ajo api sanna avyayatma bhutanam ishvaro api san prakritim swam adhisthaya sambhavami atma mayaya. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Translation: although I am unborn and my transcendental body never deteriorates, and although I am the Lord of all living entities, I still appear in every millennium in my original transcendental form. So here Krishna is making it clear. So don't think that because I had many births, I take birth in the same way ordinary living entity takes birth. Actually, I am unborn. And in one level, we all are unborn when we realize our original position as spirit souls. The birth is that only of the body. But the spirit soul acquires a material body when it takes birth, right? Krishna, on the other hand, does not assume a material body when he appears. Appears in his original form. For Krishna, there is no difference between spirit and body. They are all one. He is all spirit. Mm. In our case, we are spirit souls, but we are covered by successive layers of false ego, um, then intelligence, mind, subtle senses, then gross senses, which change based on the biological body. And the Krishna does not have all these different layers. He's all spirit. So that is a distinction. So then he's unborn in that sense, and his body is transcendental. You see, so it's not, our body is not transcendental. Our body is subject to birth, death, and deterioration. His body never deteriorates. So at the time of this was spoken, Krishna was, he had many grandchildren, great grandchildren, but he never appeared any older than a 16 or 20-year-old young body. And he is the Lord of all living entities. He appears in every millennium. Yuga, here millennium does not refer to what we call in English a millennia, which is a cycle of 1,000 years. Here actually does refer to a different kind of millennia, not 1,000 years, but refers to 1,000 cycles of the 4 yugas, which is one day of Brahma. In one day of Brahma, Krishna only appears once in his original transcendental form. See, I still appear every millennium in my original transcendental forms, though Krishna's incarnations are unlimited. Matsya, Kurma, Vara, Narsingha, Vamana, Parshuram, Rama, Balaram, Buddha, Kalki. So, and these are 10, but there are innumerable. Those are different incarnations of Krishna, but Krishna is the original personality. So that original personality in Goloka Vrindavan, who is the source of all other incarnations, that original personality appears only once in 1,000 cycles. Millennium is 1,000 years, but here Srila Prabhupada Yuga he translates that a millennium, right? So it's still 1,000 cycle, but not of years, but 1,000 cycles of the 4 yugas. So how long is that? So we calculated that in the past. The 4 yugas, Satya, Treta, Dwapar, Kali, together they are 4.32 million years. And then that multiplied by 1,000 would be 4.32 billion years. So that's a long time, 4.32 billion years. So in 4.32 billion years, Krishna appears once in his original form. And so we can consider ourselves lucky that we happen to have got a human form of life in the Kali Yuga that immediately followed the Dwapar Yuga in which Krishna appeared. It's only 5,000 years ago. So 5,000 over 4.32 billion years is negligible, as if Krishna just appeared very recently. And then in the same Kali Yuga, Krishna appears as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in the mood and complexion of Radharani, and makes it easy for everyone to achieve devotional service. In that sense, we should consider ourselves very fortunate. And we should make the best use of this human opportunity in this Kali Yuga. Though Kali Yuga has many faults, also achieving the love of Godhead is very easy. It's made easy in this age, despite of many faults. So in the purport, Srila Prabhupada mentions, the Lord has spoken about the peculiarity of his birth. So, though he had many births, his birth is not like of an ordinary person. He may appear like an ordinary person, but difference is he remembers everything of his many, many past births. Not only his, but also all living entities. On the other hand, a common man cannot even remember what one has done few hours before. Another thing is dreams. Dreams we never remember. We hardly remember our dreams. Early in the morning, we might have some. You're half asleep, half awake. You might have some faint remembrance of what the dream was. But once you are fully active, and then immediately you will forget. Um, if somebody asked what he did exactly at the same time one day earlier, it would be very difficult for a common man to answer immediately. He would surely have to dredge his memory to recall what he was doing exactly at the same time one day before. So dredging, generally refers to any water body when is deposited by soil or mud which comes along with the flow of the river. Um, and that's why when somebody wants to construct a bridge or a dam, they have to excavate that land as if dredging, have to go and pull it out. So that is being used in reference to memory, as if, you have to dig and make an effort to go into the recesses of our memory to recall. And even if one does that, it might still be very difficult. And yet there are men who dare to claim that they are God. So there are so many bogus gods who claim, right? And it's a popular business. So the innocent and the ignorant might be, uh, you know, uh, affected. They fall victims of such bogus individuals who claim to be God. But one should not be misled by such meaningless claims. Again, Krishna also explains that his prakriti, his nature, as well as Swarupa, is the same. Then again, Lord explains his prakriti or his form. Prakriti means nature as well as Swarupa or one's own form. So there are two terms. Swarup means form, Prakriti means nature. So Lord's form or Lord's body does not, he appears in his own body, in his original transcendental form. That's what he says, my original transcendental form. And his body does not change. Our body changes. Our body is subject to deterioration. We grow old. His body is not subject to such a change. So common living entities, not only their body ages, but in the next birth they assume a different kind of body. Sometimes in a different species of life as well. So Krishna, when he incarnates into another form, that is his expansion. So his original transcendental form as Krishna does not change. He's always there in his original transcendental form in Goloka Vrindavan as a cowherd boy. So and then his expansions are innumerable. Matsya Kurma Vara Narsingha. So when those incarnations appear in different parts of the universes, and it does not mean that he leaves Goloka Vrindavan and then he appears over this earth. Even when Krishna appeared here, he never left Goloka Vrindavan. So then which one is his original transcendental form? There is no difference. When he appears in his original transcendental form, that is his immediate expansion, but that expansion is not of the same as other expansions in different different forms, like the form of a boar or a fish. So they are different as well as non-different. What does that mean? Well, they're different in the sense they appear differently, not in a human form. Does not have all the rasas, not fully manifested. But from a tattva perspective, there is no difference. So we should not consider other forms as inferior because they are not the original form. They are non-different from perspective of tattva. It is the same personality of Godhead. One can achieve perfection association of any of those innumerable forms. But at the same time, uh, each of these forms, they appear for a particular reason. For instance, the form of a fish is very attractive to other fishes. So he was stretching billions of miles when the whole universe was inundated with the floods of devastation, and all the aquatics were attracted to that majestic form of the Lord. And in that, they were following wherever the Matsya was going in this vast ocean. So in that form, in that way, they all expressed their love and devotion to the Lord, uh, and they achieved perfection. Now, humans who were on that boat with Maharaj Satyavrata, who were also being, rescued by Matsya on that ship, which was tied to the horn of the Matsya form. They also must be attracted by the majestic form, but the aquatics can appreciate it better, right? And so, humans, we have different rasas, and we want dasya, sakhya, vatsalya, madhurya. Those rasas cannot be effectively actually expressed to forms of a fish or a turtle, kurma. So in that sense, there is a difference. Otherwise, the transcendental form of the Lord, there is no difference. Even when the Lord appears in the boar, so boar, form of a pig, a wild pig, is from a material perspective, is not is not very clean, right? But because the Lord had to perform this transcendental pastime to uplift the earth, which has fallen into the nether regions, which are not clean, he assumed the form of the boar, which is very suitable to perform that kind of work, to go into unclean regions. That doesn't mean the Lord is unclean. It is said that after the Lord emerged from that water of Garbhodak ocean, and many times, like the boars, what they would do is they would try to dry themselves, right? Because their hairs are all wet. So they would shake their body vigorously, and that water would sprinkle everywhere. So if it is a ordinary pig, and if you're standing next to it, comes out of a filthy drain, right? And then it starts shaking its body vigorously, and that dirty water might sprinkle on us, and we'll become impure. On the other hand, when the Lord appears, the water which might fall on others by his vigorous shaking, that is Charanamrit. So that's not an ordinary. Uh, uh, so we should not consider that form as an ordinary form of a pig. So in this way, there are differences. Lord is not an ordinary living entity. He might appear in a human form of body, or in the forms of, in different species of life. So the conditioned soul may have one kind of body in the present birth, and he has a different body in the next birth. Krishna does not have it. When he does appear in other species of life, those are his transcendental forms, which are expansions of his original form, which always remains. It's not that his original form goes away or is unmanifest when the other forms are manifested on this earth. Rather, all the forms are eternally existing in the spiritual world. In the material world, the living entity has no fixed body but transmigrates from one body to another. The Lord, however, does not do so. Whenever he appears, he does so in the original body by his internal potency. So once in a millennia, he appears in his original form. In other words, Krishna appears in the material world in his original form, which is a human form, which has two hands, he is holding a flute. He appears exactly in his eternal body, uncontaminated by this material world. So our body is made up of the three modes of nature, which are the basic ingredients by which the entire material universe is created. The sattva, raja, tama. Everything is combination of three. So Krishna's body is not a combination of those three modes. Although he appears in the same transcendental body and is the Lord of the universe, it still appears that he takes birth like an ordinary living entity. But he does not. How did Krishna appear? Srimad Bhagavatam describes, first he appeared in the mind of Vasudev. So Vasudev means pure mind. And Vasudev means one who appears in that pure mind. So the name of Krishna is Vasudev because his father is Vasudev. So there is a Amatra that is added. So there's difference between Vasudev and Vasudev. And Vasudev, being a devotee of the Lord, he had completely purified his mind. So first, Lord has to appear in the mind, and we have to purify our mind. We have to, from that we understand that we should be free from all the impurities. Kama, Krodha, Lobha, Moha, Mada, Matsarya. When we are free, then the Lord appears by his sweet will in our mind. From that, he transferred himself into the heart of Devaki. Right. So in that way, the Lord appeared by his sweet will. So he did not appear like an ordinary living entity appears through seminal discharge of the father into the womb of the mother. So that's not how the Lord appears. And although his body does not deteriorate like a material body, it appears that Krishna grows from childhood to boyhood and from boyhood to youth. But that's it. He does not age beyond youth. So why then he appears in childhood, boyhood to youth? Because in all these ages there are different rasas that he can experience. So his original form is always in the form of a youth. By appearing to go through the phases of childhood and boyhood, he gives the opportunity to his devotees who are in the mood of Vatsalya Ras. So Vatsalya Ras is also there when the child grows up beyond youth, that is there, but it is supremely manifested in younger ages. When the parents, they think that my child is in his young age is completely dependent on the parents, cannot do anything on its own. And so the intensity and the desire to serve during those ages is much more involved, and the Lord wanted to experience that. But astonishingly, even though astonishingly enough, he never ages beyond the youth. So at the time of battle of Kurukshetra, he had many grandchildren at home. In other words, he had sufficiently aged by material calculation, definitely more than 100 years. But he looked like a young man, not more any younger than 20 or 25 years old. So we never see a picture of Krishna in old age because he never grows old like us. So Bhishma Pitama was also there, right? And Bhishma Pitama, by material calculation, is much more older than Krishna. Because Krishna and Arjuna are of the same age, and Bhishma Pitama is the grandsire of Arjuna. So we see Bhishma Pitama's body had aged. He's much more older. But Krishna is not. He always appears youthful. But who is the oldest? He is the oldest in the entire creation. No one is older than Krishna. But so sometimes in some of the traditions of the world, when they talk about God, the God is depicted as an old man with a white beard. That's the depictions of God. That's not very attractive. So we cannot bring our material conception of the world and apply it to God, right? So the scriptures, the Vedic scriptures describe in detail how does the Lord look. Shama Sundara, Nava Yovanam, always youthful. Nava, new, every day is newly youthful. It's very attractive to look at. Neither his body nor his intelligence ever deteriorates or changes. You see Alzheimer's people have, in old age, dementia, loss of memory. So his memory, intelligence also does not only his body, his memory, intelligence, none of that deteriorate. Therefore, it is clear that in spite of his being in the material world, he is the same unborn, eternal form of bliss, knowledge, changeless in his transcendental body and intelligence. Satta Chitta Ananda. Satta is unborn, Anadi, Ajam. Ajam is unborn. Form of bliss, Ananda, knowledge, Chitta, and Satta. Sat means does not change, truth. Sat means truth, and truth means is always true, never changes. So factually, his appearance and disappearance are like the sun's rising before moving before us and disappearing from our eyesight. So sun rises in the morning and it sets in the evening, but rises again the next day. So we cannot. So it's foolish to think that hey, sun took birth at 5:11 a.m. Pacific time this morning. I saw it. Sun did not exist before that. And then when the sun sets, it's 9:45 p.m. The sun set, and now sun is dead. It's gone. You cannot see it. So that is foolish. And now in case of sun, because we see sun rising and setting, it's obvious. So no one would make such a claim. But Krishna similarly also manifests, or he appears once in a millennia. Now that period is such a long, we have not experienced, or at least we don't recall all the previous millennia, because our current lifespan is so small or so short. We don't have that experience, and so it might appear that oh, Krishna also takes birth and dies, just like there are insects who lifespan is less than 24 hours, and so they cannot experience more than one sunrise and one sunset. And so for them, they might think, oh, this something in the sky that's very hot, what kind of creature that is, but they might think, oh, the lifespan of this creature is, not any longer than my lifetime, which is just one day. So that is a foolish conclusion. And it comes from the fact that the insect does not have any other experience. Of course, it doesn't have any intelligence to think or contemplate on what sun is, but to just for the sake of example. So similarly, because we don't have recollection of all the instances of previous millennia, we might come to that erroneous conclusion. But Krishna's appearance is like that of a sun. He appears every millennia, just like the sun appears every day. When the sun is out of sight, we might think that sun has set. When the sun is before our eyes, we think the sun is on the horizon. Actually, sun is always in its fixed position, but owing to our defective, insufficient senses, we calculate the appearance and disappearance of the sun in the sky. And because Lord Krishna's appearance and disappearance are completely different from that of any ordinary common living entity, it is evident that he is eternal, blissful knowledge by his internal potency, and he is never contaminated by material nature. Right, so it's Satchit Ananda. We discussed this. The Vedas also confirm that Supreme Personality of God is unborn, yet he still appears to take his birth in multi-manifestations. That means he appears in different forms. He not only appears in his original form, which is once in a millennia, but he also appears in many different forms. The Vedic supplementary literatures also confirm that even though the Lord appears to be taking his birth, he is still without change of body. In Bhagavatam, he appears before his mother as Narayana with 4 hands and the decoration of the 6 kind of full opulences. So when he takes birth, an ordinary child is helpless, is crying, is miserable, does not have any clothes or any paraphernalia, but Lord did not appear like that. He simply, it's not that Mother Devaki had to go through a labor and deliver the child. Lord just appeared out of her womb without going through the ordinary process of labor. And how did he appear? He appeared as a 4-handed Narayana to establish that, because when you look at a child, a 2-handed form, then people might conclude, oh, this is just an ordinary child. But when you see the 4-handed form of Narayana which is the form of opulence and majesty, people can conclude, of course, Devki and Vasudev, Vasudev, they already know. They don't need any proof to understand that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But for sake of others to establish, Krishna shows he appears in the four-handed Narayana form. He's fully dressed, with opulent clothing, ornaments, right? And all the paraphernalia, which is Sankha, Chakra, Gada, Padma, and all other 6 kind of opulences, which is Aishwarasya, opulence, some Virasya, right? And his strength, full knowledge, full renunciation, all beauty, right? So all the 6 opulences are fully manifested in that form of the Lord. His appearance in his original eternal form is his causeless mercy. So after assuming that appearing in that four-handed Narayana form, then he transformed into his original form as a two-handed. And then as a form of a baby, two-handed, blue complexioned baby, right? But before that, he showed his form as Narayana, which is the form in which he appeared. So, and why does he appear in his original form? To bestow his causeless mercy on all the living entities. So they can concentrate and meditate on the Supreme Lord. They can relate to him. Now, Lord has the same form as us, in human form. If his Lord is always manifest in his four-handed Narayana form, and then we can only look upon him with awe and reverence. And the other rasas like friendship, parental affection, conjugal affection, they cannot fully manifest. Of course, in his four-handed Narayana form, he does have a consort, which is Lakshmi. But for the gopis of Vrindavan to fully manifest their love towards the Lord, the form that is most appropriate is the two-handed form. Yeah. So, what was the sentence? His appearance, his original eternal form is his causeless mercy bestowed upon the living entities so that he can concentrate on the Supreme Lord as he is. And not on mental concoctions or imaginations, which the impersonalists wrongly think the Lord forms to be, right? So it is very clear there is no room for mental concoction or imagination of what the original form of the Lord is. We don't have to paint a picture of God as an old man with a long white beard. We know what that original form is. And also the impersonalists who due to limited knowledge, they might incorrectly conclude the Lord does not have a form. So that is also made absolutely clear over here. The supreme truth, does have a form. The word Maya or Atma Maya refers to Lord's causeless mercy, according to Vishwakos dictionary. The Lord is conscious of all of his previous appearance and disappearances, but a common living entity forgets everything about his past body as soon as one gets another body. So we don't have any recollection of our previous forms of life. But the Lord does. He is the Lord of all living entities because he performs wonderful and superhuman activities while he is on this earth. Therefore, the Lord is always the same absolute truth and is without differentiation between his form and self or between his quality and the body. So Krishna, when he appeared on this earth, we saw he performed so many superhuman activities. Almost every day he would, even in his childhood, he would kill so many demons, very powerful. He lifted the Govardhan hill. He married 16,108 wives. He expanded into as many number of forms. So there are many superhuman activities. It's not possible for anyone. And as we discussed, there is no difference between his body and his self. A question may now be raised as to why the Lord appears and disappears in this world. And so that is explained in the next verse. So it's a very important verse. Here, Krishna is directly explaining his position. Mm. And so we spent enough, we should spend time understanding what is the original position of Krishna. Because if we don't have that understanding, then the entire study of Bhagavad Gita becomes meaningless. Then why even bother studying Bhagavad Gita if Lord is not any different from us? He might appear just like the form that we have, um, but does not make him an ordinary person. Any questions on this before we move on to the next verse?
Uh, Jamin, I just have one question over here.
Yeah.
So when we say that, like from one birth after another birth, we we are living a body and then we forget about everything what happened in the past.
Right.
Uh, but but you remember, like maybe some time back, we also had some discussion that every individual is different, like they are not on the same level.
Mhm.
So uh, definitely maybe we don't get the memories from the past birth, but the kind of consciousness what you have gained from your previous birth will still continue with yourself. And and then maybe say and that is somehow helping individuals to move on to the next level. So
That's right.
is it something which is right?
Yeah, that's a very great point. That's true. So our gross body is destroyed, our biological body is destroyed, but our subtle body, which is comprising of mind, intelligence, and false ego, that continues on from one life to another life. And so our impressions, they are not lost. The impressions are there. So here's an example. I mentioned earlier that all learnings that we have, good or bad, they filter through different layers. Um, like swimming, for instance. When I'm learning to swim, I I have to first be trained how to move my arms and legs in a particular way. So it is uh, on a very sensual platform, not sensual in terms of enjoyment, but on a very bodily level. It's not very unnatural for me, so I'm still trying to just acquainted get my body acquainted and learn basic movements. So it's not natural, right? Then by continuous practice, what will happen is I develop the muscle memory, and then as soon as I'm put into a particular situation, I learn different forms of swimming. Then I know where to apply. It's a theory, right? Should I swim in this way or that particular way, right? There are different techniques, especially when is preparing for competitive swimming. um, then there is a there is a phase where now the body is accustomed, right? I can swim nicely, but now the intellectual stage comes where if I'm attending theoretical classes for my and training for competitive swimming, then in this situation, well, this technique you should apply, right? And so when I'm put into this situation, I have to recollect what I studied in theoretic classes from my coach, right? A coach is there instructing, and then I have to apply that. So now the body is fine. The body is now completely accustomed, but now I have to intellectually apply these things. And then when I become even more mature, what will happen is uh, as soon as I'm in a particular situation, I don't have to spend time applying or thinking my intelligence what I should apply. Right? It's just come natural. It's part of my ego, a part of my identity. So the right. So I'm not thinking about a theory. so the theory is there, but I don't have to think about theory and apply and intellectually, what needs to be done. As soon as I'm in a situation, it comes natural to me. So now these are impressions, right? That's part of my identity. And over a period of time, one might even forget the theory that one has learned in the class. It could be a long time, right? But the knowledge is now inculcated. It has become part of one's identity. For instance, so in that, so whatever that, once the knowledge reaches that stage of realization, it becomes natural to us. Though I might have forgotten the specific details or instructions or the math techniques of why things are working in a particular way, but I am able to use and apply. And so that is kind of, one's nature. So same analogy applies to, our learnings or in the past on previous lives. We have gone through in all the stages, right, from our experiences, from a bodily platform to intellectual platform to an identity platform. And once things become part of identity, that is retained. So we acquire a particular nature, but the details are forgotten. I might not remember all the instructions from my elementary or secondary school that in this particular class on this day, my teacher instructed me that, hey, this we want to do mathematics, then you have to suppose I want to do solve a differential equation, or I want to solve an integration problem. Maybe that's a complex problem, but even most of us have forgotten that. But let's say multiplication, everyone knows how to multiply. And the teacher would have actually taught us in a very easy way that an elementary grade student can understand, and how to break it down and how to solve a multiplication problem. And I don't remember any of those details. Probably the teacher spent months to slowly teach all those concepts. I don't remember all of them, but I do know how to multiply, right? And I can multiply. In some of the cases, it's muscle memory. Many times we don't even go through the process of multiplication. We are able to just recollect things from our memory also. So that's why when it comes to teaching to our children, the parents are can teach to some extent, but they're not as efficient in teaching to their children as the teachers are, because teachers are up to speed and they're doing it day in day out, and so they have kind of mastered that skill. They'll break it down in a very specific way. So we have learned that, but we don't recall. But the final outcome is there, which is we know how to calculate and we can calculate. So that has become part of our identity, and that retains. Does that analogy make sense? So we have forgotten the details of our past good and bad karma, but the impressions that karma left on us, those are retained, and then we act accordingly, right? So that nature is carried on to the next life. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I was trying to think if is impromptu thought of trying to think of an example, but yeah, same thing. Music. Some people are very good at music, right? And they have this from their previous life. They don't have to be taught. And they might not recollect the theory. At some point, they went through all the theory, right? But then, so they might not have recollections of those theoretical aspects, the basics and stuff, but the steps that were involved. But you put in a situation and they are able to quickly pick up, or they are very adept at playing musical instruments. They don't have to go through the same amount of training again. So yes, definitely your nature carries on, but the details are lost. Any other questions? Okay. On. Yes, Prabhu. Nitin Prabhu, you wanted to, or Kashyap Prabhu? Yes.
Yeah. Actually, you actually provided a very good analogy how the vasanas. Is it safe to say those are the vasanas that we carry from previous life?
Yeah. So there are three things, right? One is
Experiences and
vritti.
vasanas. Mhm.
right? We have vritti, vashna, and then what was the third one? Chitta. No, that is the manas chitta. There are the layers, but we have vritti. There is vasana, and then what was the third one? I can't recollect. Does anyone recollect? So vritti is at a
Mana,
body level. Hmm?
is it mana?
So yeah, mana is the mind, and chitta is the contaminated consciousness. But the activities of the manas and chitta are vritti, vasana, and there was the third one I can't recollect. So vritti is proclivity, and vasana is much more deeper. Yeah, yeah. So if you want to compare the two, yes, vasana is is much more deeper. For instance, when you're put into a situation, it invokes a particular kind of feelings. Where are those feelings coming from? It is coming from past life, right? Um, just like lust is invoked when one is put into a situation in very in close proximity with a sense object, right? um, say a beautiful form of a woman, right? And as soon as a child reaches puberty, that attraction is manifest. How is it manifesting from? So we have impressions from our previous life of those experiences that actually triggers uh, certain kind of feelings. Is it what you're trying to say, Prabhu?
Uh, so you said vritti, right? What is the difference between vritti and vasana?
So vritti is the initial interaction. Sometimes we cultivate habit by repeated, just like we say acquired taste. Somebody might not be accustomed to doing certain things but by repeated practice it becomes natural. So that vritti is the activity that creates impressions. Hmm? Engagement in a particular activity, it creates certain impressions, and when the impressions are hardened, they are imprinted on the mind. Then what happens is when we're put into now, even if we are not engaging in a particular activity, when we are put into a situation where somebody else is experiencing that, uh, then the emotions are invoked out from the subconsciousness. Um, so in that sense, Vasana is much more deeper. I'll go back and try to recollect what was the third one, and then I can explain um, all
Was
three
it
of them.
sanskar, Prabhuji?
Yes, Prabhu. Yeah, you're right. It was samskars. Yeah, vritti, vasana, and samskars. Yes, samskars are even more deeper, right? So now that we have all three, if you want to explain, uh, is so samskars are and impressions which are very much hard coded, and they they are this at an appropriate time or situation, they come out. Now what is the difference between vritti, vasana, and samskar? So vritti is actually, as I said, the activity in which one engages um, and cultivates a habit, and the vasana are basically the experiences and emotions that one experiences by uh, by engaging in that particular proclivity, right? And then that leaves an impression on the mind, which retains for a very long period of time, right? Um, what's a good example where all three could be explained? Let's say somebody is um, same example. Maybe one is, say because of bad association, one learns how to engage in smoking or intoxication. So earlier one is not accustomed. So that habit has to be cultivated. And so maybe in that bad association, that person learns, he goes to a friend and he says, hey, have a smoke. What's wrong? Right. So first time he takes a smoke, he starts coughing. It's not very natural. Mm. But then by every day he meets that person, and so it kind of triggers, oh, that I have to, he every time will encourage you to take a smoke. So now that vritti is developed, that habit, that, oh, I'm going to meet my friend, we're going to have a smoke. Now what will happen is, because of that repeated habit, it brings certain kind of experiences. And so there is a vasana or desire. So now there is an anticipation that I'm going to meet my friend and we are going to have a smoke. So vasana, that desire to engage in that particular activity is there. Now, every time one is engaging in that activity, it is also creating an impression on the mind that is called samskara. So from vritti, the vasana comes, and then vasana also leads to samskara. So what is going to happen is, now that impression of the experiences, oh, it relieves my mind, I'm free from all stress, right? So that experiences which one had at that moment, which is called vasana, the desires, they develop at that point in time. That experience is now firmly imprinted in the mind, which is samskaras. And so what will happen is, when one is in a situation now, one is not meeting one's friend, for instance, right? But one is, say, going through a stress, and then he feel, well, you know what, maybe if I have a smoke, then I'll feel better. Or maybe he sees someone else smoking, and that reminds him of that impressions from the previous experiences which are ordained. He says, yes, I remember that, that smoking will actually help me relieve some stress. So those emotions and desires now are triggered by recollecting those past experiences, and the trigger happened because that person maybe watched someone else smoking. Now somebody who is not accustomed to smoking might see other person smoking and he might be turned off, because his experiences and samskaras are different. So vritti is basically engaging in a particular activity. The vasana are basically the experiences which are associated with those activities, the desires associated in engaging in those actions. And then samskaras are basically the impressions from those past experiences that can emerge at an appropriate time or place.
Thank you, Prabhu. So out of this, so it looks like a chain thing, right? The samskara is the final result. So the samskaras are the one that actually propagate from one life to other life,
Yes,
or
yeah.
vasanas also come.
Samskaras actually propagate from one life to next. And then when those samskaras are triggered, then they will lead into desires or vasana, right? When there is appropriate trigger, that samskaras are invoked, and so that subtle will now start manifesting into gross. And then the desires will come, and when the desires will come, one will engage in those desires. Then the engagement in those desires is the vritti will manifest. So the vritti actually leads to vasana, vasana leads to samskaras. And the reverse is true in the sense that when the samskaras are invoked or triggered, it will again manifest back as in the form of vasana, and then it will form on a further manifest in vritti, right? So it's a feedback cycle, right? And just like initially one was not comfortable smoking, right? But then by practice, what happened is the initial hiccups that the person that coughing and all that, or when is not doing it in a proper way, or has a shame in doing that. So his previous samskaras might have been, if he's raised in a good family, his previous samskaras were, oh, smoking is bad. But then because his friend is encouraging to do, then he says, oh, it's not so bad, right? What's wrong? So now the good samskaras were overwritten by bad samskaras. So now he's very comfortable, and he has every time the desires are invoked. Earlier he did not have desire, right? Even if his friend is saying smoke, he says, no, I'm not going to smoke. I know there is a hesitation. That means the vasana is not there. So one has to start at a bodily activity, right? Because he does not have any vasana, does not have any samskar, only vritti, in the sense that he's just doing that activity because of peer pressure or social pressure. So he's engaged at that level. But then by engaging in that activity, he's experiencing the effect of that activity, and so that has a strong effect, and that leads desires like, oh, this is what my experience was. So that is vasana. And so now, over a period of time, the friend does not need to prod him. So every time they meet, he says, okay, let's smoke, right? And so that desire will manifest as soon as he's going to see his friend, for instance. But now that is also leading to samskara, that impression. And that becomes one's nature. And so now he doesn't even need the association of one's friend, right? Earlier he would smoke only in the company of his friend. Oh, I saw my friend, okay, let's have a smoke. But now, because the samskaras, they are imprinted in his in the subconsciousness, and that's become part of his identity, then one would engage in that proclivity based on other triggers. Whenever that impressions are triggered by any situation, it may not be his friend, you might see someone else doing it, or one might be going through a stress, and then one actually triggers that. So in that way, it becomes much more ordained, or hard coded in one's consciousness. And it is samskaras that actually carry on from one life to another life. That's absolutely true. And then they would manifest in a reverse way, in the sense that when they are triggered, they will lead into desires, and desires will lead into actions. Does that make sense?
Yes, Prabhu. Yes. So to understand this part, okay. So we have samskaras, we have karma, right? And so what is that a person have to do in a lifetime? What's the goal of the person have to do? So to eliminate all the samskaras and also eliminate all the karma. Is that what is the state where we say it is moksha?
Yeah. So moksha means liberation. Liberation from one's past karmic reactions and past materialistic propensity. And this is a natural outcome of realizing one's position as the eternal servant, eternal part and parcel of the Lord. And when we revive that loving relationship with Krishna, automatically the liberation is simply a byproduct. So the devotees of the Lord, they don't have to explicitly seek that liberation. It becomes a natural outcome of it. Explicitly seeking liberation devoid of devotion is very strenuous, very difficult, and very difficult to achieve, to get free from the cycle of karma outside of the realm of bhakti or devotion. But when one is cultivating good samskaras, good samskaras in the sense transcendental samskaras, which are beyond the three modes of nature, because the good samskaras, they also are samskaras, right? All the good qualities that we cultivate, which are devoid of bhakti or devotion to the Lord, they also lead to bondage. A golden chain is as much as an iron one. And then one has to assume another body to experience or enjoy the results of one's past good karma. What is transcendental means that, because even if we do say of course charity and everything should never be given up, but when we relate everything to the Lord, we do it for the pleasure of the Lord, because even in pure good, even in goodness, there is this sense of satisfaction or the sense of I am the doer. Okay, people are miserable, they are suffering, and I want to help them, and I should help them. But the effect is that, see, I am the giver, I am the provider of the charity. That false identity when it comes, and oh, I'm cultivating kindness, that's so good. So that also leads to bondage. It's better than not doing charity or doing harm to others. But when one sees that no, all living entities, they're all part and parcel of the Lord. And they are put into situations, everyone's put into different situation according to their karma, but I can relate, they're all my siblings, God siblings. They're all part and parcels of Krishna. And then as a grihastha, I have some obligation in serving the living entities, and I cannot serve the whole world. Actually, I'm incapable of serving others, what strength I have. But whatever I can do, I'll try to do. So then one might, at least for grihastha, that is said that they should offer food, especially when in the traditional or the ancient Vedic period, grihastha would go out and say anyone's hungry before having lunch or a meal. And then if you call out to who might be out there who is hungry, we cannot travel long distances, but within one's vicinity, if someone's hungry, it's his duty to find out and feed that individual, right? And but one is not feeding with the sense that oh, I am the provider. What can we provide? But one sees that, well, whatever I have is by Krishna's grace. And then as I am taking prasadam, I'll offer the remnants of the food offered to the Lord. I'll give it to those who need it. In prasadam, everyone needs it, right? It doesn't mean one has to be poor. So the idea is whoever is available, you offer it to them. And so that is pure goodness, in the sense that it's not material goodness, it's a transcendental goodness. So in that way, one is not implicated in any sort of karmic reaction. Because as long as there is good karma or bad karma, one has to assume one's body. And in regards to the samskaras and the vasanas and vritti, whether there is good samskara or bad samskaras, the samskaras will actually prevail, and then it would trigger another cycle. As long as all the samskaras are on a material platform, suppose I cultivated the habit of doing something good, which is devoid of relationship to Krishna, then I'll get another opportunity, another life to continue to propagate that vritti, that samskaras, right? It could be say charity, right, or doing good to humanity, and this is all good. It's not that one should not do it, but if it is devoid of relationship to Krishna, then that kind of samskaras will also trigger another form of life, and one will continue to propagate in that way. And what happens in due course of time is that because it's not anchored strongly to devotional service, one will not achieve the same satisfaction. And what will happen is one won't be able to maintain that goodness or sattva gun forever. From sattva, one will go to passion. From passion, one will go to rajas. And one can never be fixed in one mode if one is not fixed in relationship with Krishna. So what will happen is, I did so much good things, but what did I gain in the end? I had my failures, and still people did not appreciate me, because with doing nice activities also comes appreciation, recognition. There are billionaires who do a lot of charity, But again, they are subjected to criticism. You did not do enough, or you did not do right. And then he says, well, why should I even bother doing it, right? That kind of feeling might come. And one goes into mode of passion and wants to achieve things for one's own gratification without being very generous. But that also leads to frustration, then goes into ignorance. And he says, why even bother doing that, right? And one is lazy, one becomes victim of depression, addiction. And some period of time, you might feel, again, I'm wasting my life. So let me, put things back in shape, and one might become again passionate or come to the goodness. So the modes are always changing. Sometimes it fluctuates throughout the day and all the time, but then on a larger scale, they change over lifetimes as well. So the idea is, yes, we want to get free from karma as well as our vrittis and vasanas and samskaras. But then in order to be situated perfectly without being subject to change, we have to acquire the quality, our original quality, which is the quality of the Lord himself. So when we are associated with him, we can retain our original nature. Does that make sense?
Thank you, Prabhu. Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay. Okay, verse number 7. It's a very famous verse. यदा यदा हि धर्मस्य ग्लानिर्भवति भारत अभ्युत्थानमधर्मस्य तदात्मानं सृजाम्यहम्. Translation: whenever and wherever there is a decline in religious practice, O descendant of Bharat, and a predominant rise of a religion, at the time I descend myself. So here this is a continuation of the previous theme, where Krishna is explaining his unique position. That he appears in original transcendental form, right? He remembers all the previous births of himself as well as all other living entities. So so since he said that I had many births, the next question might be, well, you're not subject to karma. Then why you need to reappear? Every living entities, they appear in different forms and they have many births because they are implicated in karmic reaction. So Krishna does not appear for that reason, because Krishna is not implicated in karmic reaction. Then why does he appear? Well, he appears when there is decline in morality, and there's a decline in spirituality, and there's a rise of irreligion. At the time the Lord appears. And in the next verse, he'll explain what does he do after appearing. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada mentioned the word Srijami is significant here. Srijami cannot be used in the sense of creation, because according to previous verse, there is no creation of the Lord's form or body, since all the forms are eternally existent. So we talked about that. All forms of the Lord, they are eternally existing in the spiritual world. So here Srijami is translated as manifest. So what is the difference between creation and manifestation? Creation means that thing never existed, and now it is created. Manifest means it's actually always existing, eternally existing, but sometimes it's visible, sometimes it's not. So when Krishna appears, it means he's manifest, not that he's born at that time. It's like the sun, it rises and sets. So it's manifest and unmanifest. But then it doesn't mean that sun is born at that time. So that's the difference. Therefore, Srijami means that the Lord manifests himself as he is. Also, the Lord appears on schedule, namely, he appears at the end of Dwapar Yuga of the 28th millennium of the 7th Manu in one day of Brahma. So he appears once in one day of Brahma, and the time that he appears is also fixed, in the sense that in one day of Brahma there are 14 Manus. So right around the center or the middle of the day of Brahma, is the reign of 7th Manu. So we are currently in the reign of 7th Manu. So in the reign of 7th Manu, Vaivasvat Manu, each Manu, how many Chaturyugas happen in one reign of Manu? 71. So 71 cycles of the 4 yugas happen. So in the 28th cycle of the 4 yugas is the Lord appears in the Dwapar Yuga of that 28th cycle. Though he appears according to that schedule, he had no obligation to adhere to such rules and regulations because he is completely free to act in many ways at his will. So it's not that he has to stick to that schedule. But once in a day of Brahma he appears. Whenever there is rise of irreligiosity. See, it's not that, hey, there is a rise in irreligiosity, but see, it's not my time yet. It's not on my schedule, so I'm not going to appear. So it's not like that either. Uh, so whenever, that's what this verse is saying. Well, though Lord is, it seems that Lord appears according to his schedule, but he's not subject to schedule. Whenever there is need, he appears. And so whenever there is decline in religiosity and moral principles, he appears at that time. The principles of the religion are laid down in the Vedas. Any discrepancy in the matter of properly executing the rules of the Vedas makes one irreligious. In the Bhagavatam, it is stated that such principles are the laws of the Lord. Only the Lord can manufacture a system of religion. So, sometimes we see man-made religions. So the man-made religions have no value. Or rather, if you go to the Department of Religious Studies, they will say, well, all religions are man-made. It appears to them that, well, a person at some point in time wrote a scripture or, came up with these different principles, and that religion started. They try to assign a historical timeline to different religious practices. So the actual religion is not like that. There might be some truth in the sense that there are some man-made religions, and so it appears to academicians that all religions are like that. But of course, Vedas, they predate the creation or the manifestation of the universe, right? And so they eternally exist. And so the question that it's a creation of by an individual that does not have any basis. Actually, the principles of the religion are ordained by the Lord himself. Only the Lord can make such a system. The Vedas are also accepted as the originally spoken by the Lord himself to Brahma, right? So it's not that Vyasadeva, because he wrote the Vedas 5,000 years ago, the Vedas did not exist prior to that. He just put it in written form. Actual Vedic knowledge was instructed right after Brahma, the first living entity, was born. And Krishna actually revealed that knowledge to Brahma from within his heart. Therefore, the principles of dharma or religion are the direct orders of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So there is a famous verse in Srimad Bhagavatam. It says, Dharmam tu sakshat bhagvat pranitam na vai vidu rishayo na pi devaha ashura manushya kutonu vidyadhar charanadya. It says that the principles of religion, they are created directly by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And they are intricate and difficult to understand even for demigods, the demons, even for other devatas like Charanas, the lower demigods. Then what to speak about human beings? So it's no wonder that somebody might come to an incorrect conclusion of about who created dharma. What is the purpose of dharma? So these principles are actually explained, are indicated throughout Bhagavad Gita. The purpose of the Vedas is to establish such principles under the order of the Supreme Lord. And the Lord here directly speaking, and the Lord directly orders at the end of the Gita, the highest principle of religion is to surrender unto Him only and nothing more. So this is the conclusion. The purpose of the Vedas is to establish the principles of dharma. And what is the essence of dharma? Well, the essence is established directly by Krishna in Bhagavad Gita, which is spoken directly by Krishna. He says in the end, Sarva dharmam parityajya mam ekam saranam vraja. Give up all varieties of religion. And what is your real religion? Well, you surrender unto me. So Arjuna is giving reference to Arjuna. He had manufactured some religion. What was he saying in the beginning of chapter 1, right? He was saying Jati Dharma, my family tradition. This tradition will be destroyed, this tradition, that tradition, right? Kula Dharma, Jati Dharma. Who is going to offer the pinda to the forefathers? Obligation. So all of that is true. It's not that that is not relevant. But the ultimate dharma is to Jiveshu Rup Hoy Krishna Nitya Jasana. This revive our original Rupa. And then Krishna says in the end of Bhagavad Gita, Sarvam Dharmam Paritajya. Give up all varieties of religion. So what he is saying is give up all the varieties of manufactured religion. What is the real religion? Mam ekam saranam braja. And just surrender unto me. So that is the conclusion of Bhagavad Gita. And that is the highest principle of religion. By adhering to that principle of religion, everything else is automatically achieved. Otherwise, if we artificially try to be on a moralistic platform, we cannot sustain it for a long time. But by becoming a genuine devotee of the Lord, all other principles of morality are naturally manifested when they are sustainable. Because by our own strength, we cannot be moral. But when we see how the Lord is always adhering to morality, from Him we get strength. How the Lord, He is not does not change His behavior or nature depending on the situation. How He is equal to both demons and devotees. Lord does not make any distinction. The Putana tried to poison Krishna, but Krishna ignored that fact that there is poison. But the fact that she offered her breast milk, he says she's my mother because she offered me her breast milk. And so he gave her the same position as Mother Yashoda in the spiritual world, the position of a mother. So by hearing and meditating on the pastimes of Krishna, we also acquire a similar nature. And we stop making different distinction between friends and enemies. And so that is sustainable. And we are equal to everyone, and we say how we have to gain strength. How can we gain strength? We gain strength by learning and meditating about Krishna. Well, Krishna is doing this. That's the ideal behavior, and I'll do it. Otherwise, if we artificially try to be kind and equal to everyone, we'll be frustrated. We don't have any source of inspiration to gain that strength. In that sense, it's not sustainable, even if one is able to engage in some moral platform for some time. So from Bhagavatam, we understand that Lord Brahma is the incarnation of Krishna who appeared when materialism was rampant. Lord Buddha, sorry. We understand Lord Buddha is the incarnation of Krishna who appeared when materialism was rampant and materialists were using the pretext of the authority of the Vedas. So on the authority of the Vedas, they were misinterpreting and were engaging in different animal sacrifices. But the idea of the sacrifices was to indulge in meat eating. They were not really doing it for as an offering or oblations to the demigods. And they did not even have the purities. In the previous times, at the end of the sacrifice, by their purity, they would bring the dead animal back to the life in a younger body. Generally, they would sacrifice an old animal. By the end of the sacrifice, that animal is rejuvenated in a young body. But that's not that the Brahmanas lost that capability, and they were simply engaging in such practices and indulging in meat eating. So although there are certain restrictive rules and regulations regarding animal sacrifice for particular purposes in the Vedas, people of demonic tendencies still took to animal sacrifices without reference to Vedic principles. So Lord Buddha appeared to stop this nonsense and to establish the Vedic principles of non-violence. Therefore, each and every avatar or incarnation of Lord has a particular mission. And they are all described in the revealed scriptures. So this is also another scenario of decline in religion, increase in irreligious activities. So at the time, Lord appeared as Buddha in order to establish the true principle. He had to reject the Vedas. Now, Vedic knowledge is perfect. It was not that Vedic knowledge was a fault of Vedic knowledge. Rather, it was a misinterpretation of the Vedic knowledge that was causing the problem. So one way to solve this was, well, you completely reject the Vedas, because he thought that it was at that moment it would be very difficult for people of limited intelligence in Kali Yuga, Manda Buddhi, Manda Ayu, memory, intelligence, all is deteriorated. And he said, well, the immediate need of the hour is to stop this irreligious practice. And so instead of trying to explain the correct interpretation, he says, let's just reject the Vedas. And that's why Buddhism is, though Lord Buddha is an incarnation of Vishnu, Buddhism is not is a separate religion. It's not considered as a Vedic religion because they reject the Vedas. That was the right thing to do at the time. And that's why dharma becomes difficult to understand. Here God is coming and he is rejecting the text and the scriptures that he himself established. Sometime a parent or a teacher has to do that. They have to take a step back. Half knowledge is dangerous, and if the thing the child or the student is gaining an incorrect understanding, they might take a step back and he says, forget it, that's not true, that's wrong, right? That doesn't mean it's wrong in absolute sense, but at that instance or in that scenario, it's not applicable to that individual, and then one might have to reject it strongly, just to discourage the child or the student to engage in incorrect application of that knowledge. So it is not a fact that Lord appears only on the Indian soil. He can manifest himself anywhere and everywhere, whenever he desires to appear. In each and every incarnation, he speaks as much about religion as can be understood by the particular people under their particular circumstances. So that's a very important point. So at the time, Lord Buddha thought that people cannot understand this, and so he had to reject that. So similarly, depending on the level of the people at a given place or time, the instructions are appropriately given. In case of Arjuna, he was already Kshatriya, twice born Dvija, right? Following Varnashram, following high morality. And so the Bhagavad Gita was spoken at his level. In other instances, Krishna would have sent his empowered emissaries to propagate religion according to their level of understanding. Here, Arjuna did not want to kill, and so Krishna had to explain, there is a situation where violence is justified, right? Of course, as Kshatriya, he knows that it's not the first time he's fighting. So it's a different kind of instruction. On the other hand, when people are already engaged in senseless killing, then the Lord has to instruct, thou shalt not kill, right? So seems to be a contrary instruction. Here Krishna is encouraging Arjuna to kill. Other instances, the instructions are not to kill. So it depends on time, place, and circumstances, and the level of knowledge the student has, and what is the progress one has made so far. Sometimes he descends personally, sometimes he sends his bona fide representative in the form of his son or servant or himself in some disguised form, right? So different prophets, different emissaries, these are all representatives of Krishna. Sometimes Krishna comes personally, as he appears here right now, as he's speaking Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna. I think we can finish this verse. The principles of Bhagavad Gita were spoken to Arjuna, and for that matter, to other highly elevated persons, because he was highly advanced compared to ordinary persons in other parts of the world. You see, we just talked about this. Arjuna is a Kshatriya, he's a twice born, he's following Varnashram, he's on a high level of morality. So for him, the knowledge has to start at a higher level, as opposed to other parts of the world at a different point in time. If people are not at such a high level as Arjuna, they are at the level of irreligiosity at a much lower level, then it's a different instruction for them. For them, the instruction would be thou shalt not kill. So 2 plus 2 equals 4 is a mathematical principle that is true in the beginner's arithmetic class and also in the advanced class as well. Still, there are higher and lower mathematics. Like if a child goes through a trigonometry text and he says, this is not math, what is this sine theta, cos theta? It just looks like some, I don't know, it's maybe they're teaching you Greek language, Greek and Latin. That's not mathematics. So somebody at a lower level of mathematics cannot understand higher mathematics, but one who is at a higher, who has studied higher mathematics can also understand the lower. And so those who are learned in advanced principles of religiosity, they can also appreciate and they are accommodative of other religions which are at a lower level of instruction. There are definitely gradations. That doesn't mean they are not important. They are relevant to those individuals. So they don't reject it, right? Those who have a higher level of understanding, just like somebody is learning trigonometry and calculus, is not going to reject simple addition and subtraction as, hey, this is not math. I never say that. Similarly, those who have understanding of what dharma is, the highest principles of dharma, they can understand and appreciate all other forms of dharma, though they might be of lower gradations because they are relevant to people of certain consciousness. But those who have limited understanding, they cannot appreciate. One who is a lower, one who is practicing at a lower grade of mathematics cannot appreciate higher mathematics. Similarly, those who have very limited understanding of dharma at a lower consciousness, they think their way of spiritual realization is the highest, or that's the only way. There is no other way, right? So that is actually a manifestation of immaturity. The higher principles of religion begin with acceptance of the 4 orders and 4 statuses of social life, as will be explained in the subsequent verses. Right? So I mentioned Arjuna Varnashram. So this is at a very high level of civilization, which follows the 4 divisions of spiritual as well as social divisions of life. So the social classes and spiritual statuses. So for them, there's a different level of instruction. The whole purpose of the mission of the incarnation is to arouse Krishna consciousness everywhere. Such consciousness is manifest and non-manifest only under different circumstances. So dharma and adharma, sometimes dharma rises, sometimes adharma rises. And so whenever there's a decline in religious practices, the Lord appears and he revives dharma. So the purpose actually is to arouse that original Krishna consciousness. Okay, I think that concludes this verse. We are also about time. We can take any questions anyone might have. Any questions? Okay, no questions. We'll conclude today's class. Thank you everyone for joining. Looks like this time is working out for many of you. I'm glad. Thank you, Maulik, for staying late. I believe it's already 12:30 a.m. in Melbourne. Hope you have a good sleep. Those in Seattle area, please stay cool. I know it's going to be very hot over this weekend. Stay safe. See you all next week. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna,
Hare
Prabhuji.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
Everyone have a good weekend. Bye.
Thank you. You too. Hare Krishna.